Hey guys, we are in day 8. That means we are reading out of Matthew chapter 8. Now, Matthew chapter 8, even though we're kind of still in the beginning of the book of Matthew, we have finished the Sermon on the Mount, which that really means that we're almost halfway through Jesus's ministry. That kind of a year and a half is kind of almost up. And so we get chapter 8. And we'll continue in chapter 9. It's just kind of a list of a lot of miracles, a lot of things that Jesus does. But remember what Matthew is writing to. Matthew is writing to Jews to prove that Jesus is the Messiah. He is the Son of God. And it's interesting that when you read through these lists, and a lot of them are stories and things that we've heard of and read before and seen on the movies and done these things, but it's interesting in Matthew's recording on what he records. Let me point out a couple things, right? We have this idea in the very first verse of chapter 1. After this big Sermon on the Mount, after he said all these things and people were amazed at his preaching, what happens? Great crowds followed him. He is taught like nobody else. He's teaching, he is talking as if he is God, right? And it's just amazing. People are following him. But notice what these restarts record, right? We see at the beginning the cleansing of the leper, and he stretched out his hand and touched him. Jesus, a Jew, touched a leper. This was huge. This was so huge that Jews would never do this. They would be ceremonial and cleansed. They couldn't go to the temple. They'd have to do 40 days of purification. They'd have to do a lot of things. But Jesus touches a leper, but instantly, he was clean, right? He touched him. But notice what he says. He touched him, but it says saying, right? Saying, it's important, using his mouth, using his words, saying, be clean. And immediately he was clean. Then we have the faith of the centurion, right? Jesus comes, continue on his ministry, and this soldier comes who has lots of soldiers under him, and he says, hey, I have somebody that's sick. Heal them. And Jesus said, I'll come with you. And the centurion says, no. You don't have to come with me. You don't have to waste your time. I know what it's like to have people that work under. I know what it's like for people to obey what you say. Jesus, you say the word and I know it'll happen. And what's interesting is in verse 10, it says, when Jesus heard this, he marveled. Jesus, the Son of God, marveled at the faith of the centurion. Has Jesus ever marveled at your faith? At my faith? Man, I hope he has, right? I mean, that's just amazing. Just think of the faith of that centurion, right? Jesus marveled, and he says, and what's interesting, he says, I haven't found anybody with this kind of faith. And he goes on in verse 11, he says, I tell you, many will come from the east and the west. What that means is many will come from the Jews and the Gentiles, right? All around the world, and recline at the table with Abraham and Isaac, and recline with the Jews, right? Recline in heaven is what he's talking about, right? But there will also be some thrown out into the outer darkness, right? Some will be saved, some Jews, some Gentiles, but then there's going to be some Jews and Gentiles who will not be saved. But then it says in verse 13, and to the centurion, Jesus said, go, let it be done as you have believed. And the servant was healed, right? Once again, he said, go, it is done. He used his words. He said that. Jesus heals many. We can see Jesus goes into Peter's house. Peter's mother-in-law, she's sick, and he touches her. She instantly starts to serve him. People who brought spirits, in verse 16, he cast out spirits with a word. Notice that, with a word, once again, and healed who all were sick. Once again, in verse 18, there's a crowd around him, and people say, Jesus, I want to follow you. I want to be your disciple. I want to follow you. And he said, you need to think about it, right? Foxes have holes, birds have nests. I'm homeless. I have nowhere to lay my head. And then another guy says, Lord, let me go bury my father. Now, a lot of people read this and they think, yeah, that's kind of rude. His father wasn't dead yet. Basically, he's saying, hey, let my parents die. Let me take their estate, get all their money, have a retirement, have some money that I can live off, and then I will follow you, right? And Jesus says, no, just let the dead bury their dead, right? You either follow me or you don't. But it continues on. This lists the stories of miracles, right? Jesus calms the sea. He's on the boat. The disciples are freaking out. And then he says, then Jesus rose and what? He rebuked the storm. He used his words. He rebuked the winds and the sea, and the seas obeyed him. And then we see at the end of this that he is once again traveling on. And what happens? He comes across two demons, right? These two demons come out of this graveyard. Nobody can control them. And what do they say? These demons know Jesus, right? They know Jesus and they say, what are you here? What have you come to do with us? Why have you come to torment us? Notice this, that even the demons recognize that Jesus has power over them, right? Nobody could come around this town because these two demon-possessed men were wreaking havoc. But these two demon-possessed men know that Jesus has the power over them, right? So he does that, and he tells them to what? To go into the pigs, and that's what happens. Why is this important? If you go back to the basic belief of a Jew, what do they first know about God? In the beginning, there was nothing, and God spoke into creation. Day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6. Every day, God spoke. And he created, he made miracles. And so here in chapter 8, we see time and time and time and time again that with Jesus's words, Jesus spoke and a miracle happened. Just like the creation, Jesus is equal to, has the same power as God, the creator. And so in the middle of all these stories, we see this. But as a Jew hearing this, they would have been recognizing these words. That he just spoke. He didn't touch them. He didn't do anything. He didn't do anything miraculous. He didn't bathe them. He didn't ceremonial clean them. He didn't take them to the synagogue. No, he just spoke. Man, God spoke creation, right? And so Matthew is connecting these dots that Jesus is God. Man, I hope you guys are enjoying this. I'm enjoying this. I love reading back through Matthew together. And I hope to see you again tomorrow on day 9. God bless.